people with expired non-disclosure agreements. What's the juicy info you can now tell us? I was once on the camera crew of Pimp My Ride, and most of the show is fake. The guys knew ahead of time that we were arriving. The car had to be fully paid off, and most of the work done has to be paid for and almost full.
My cousin sent in a letter trying to get his car on the show. They told him his car wasn't ghetto enough. Their words.
The state of Oklahoma once busted a counterfeit check ring because the individuals misspelled Oklahoma on the front of some checks. They were damn near perfect copies with valid account, check-in amount numbers, and were caught when an employee who ran a reader/sorter machine noticed a rejected check with the spelling Oklahoma. I was that employee and had to testify in court regarding finding the checks. I think I'm still not supposed to talk about certain details, even though it was a long time ago.
Just, come on. How could you not quadruple check something simple like that when committing fraud?
It's usually the stupid criminals that get caught anyway.
Pasado's Safe Haven oversold their memorial dog cottages. So when a donor that cost $10,000 came to visit their dog's memorial cottage that they donated $10,000 for, Pasado's would have to swap out the memorial plaque. Super shitty.
Imagine a cemetery full of mausoleums, where you use your keycard to enter and the plaques are all nicely mounted panel TVs, showing heartwarming videos of the deceased. Except that the keycard is tied to the video shown, so you could have limitless people interred in one mausoleum, and the video just switches based on whoever swipes in.
I had to sign a non-compete NDA when I worked at a successful local bakery. We didn't sell anything super extravagant, kinda your normal stuff like cookies, brownies, cake, cupcakes, croissants. The most complicated thing we did was candy bars, but even they weren't patisserie level. The NDA was just to ensure that we didn't share/take her recipes and start our own business, which is totally reasonable. We could tell people the ingredients because of allergies and whatnot, but not specific brands or recipes. People would come in and make conversation by asking what our secret was to such amazing treats, you know, just being complimentary and not really expecting me to spell out the recipes. I'd always playfully say, oh, well, you know I can't tell you that. Or to the more chill/fun customers I'd say I'd tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. Some people really wanted to know though, and I'd have to tell them I actually legally can't talk about it. It's interesting how when some people realize they're not allowed to know, they get ravenous about getting the information. I had someone trying to sneak in our kitchen storeroom to try and deduce something. The big secret? Good quality ingredients and basic baking technique. Literally that's it. People could easily find recipes online of close approximations of anything she made and recreate them to a comparable level if they bought good ingredients and learned pretty basic baking skills.
I worked at a printing company outside DC in the late 90s/early 00s. We did work for the government from time to time. We printed materials for the investigation into the Branch Davidian cult in Waco, TX. There was tons of aerial photos of the compound, and for some reasons David Koresh owned many Camaros. They were mostly old beat-up ones, but there were a few dozen on the compound.
So you're telling me you have juicy info on a cult, but you're only mentioning some old cars that were there.
They were Camaros, bro. We need to know the years. Were there any Firebirds or Trans Ams mixed in? How many of the dope-ass Phoenix on the hood?
I was about to be a Quiznos store manager, and during orientation for the job, management proceeded to tell me that if we were to drop the food, we would have to scoop the fallen item and mix it in with the fresh products. I left that interview in the next hour and never ate at another Quiznos again. It's not much, but I was part of developing AirDrop for Mac OS X Lion 10.7 and was doing this on a 2008 Mac Pro. In the end, we were told it's not to be made compatible with 2008s and require a 2009. That made no sense because I was successfully testing it on the 2008 just fine. It was a planned obsolescence, a ploy to force users to buy a new Mac. Upset, I secretly released a patch on MediaFire for owners of a 2008 to get AirDrop. It didn't require much as I made the lockout as cheaply as possible. I also did development of USB 3.0 support and also did this on my 2008 Mac Pro. I should mention that this Mac Pro is a prototype with a unique firmware that has an inside BIOS setup with all options available for debugging, of which Apple never asked back, and I still have today in my office as my daily driver. It has no serial number and refers to itself as a prototype in any software trying to get a board revision. It also doesn't run retail Mac OS, hence I said BIOS earlier. It doesn't have a Fire, so it runs Windows 10 today with a GTX 1050 installed, and still has the USB 3.0 card I had during development. Before anyone asks, no, I didn't steal it. I asked my supervisor if they wanted it back, and he told me to keep it. They had no use for it.
As an investor, I was pitched a 10% stake in a company that owned the trademark iWatch, and their whole value weighed on Apple buying the rights from them. I declined. About a year later, Apple revealed the Apple Watch, and I sighed with relief.
My mom had NDA while sitting on a grand jury for over a year. I prodded her all the time on the case and what she was doing for over a year of her life. She refused to tell me, only saying that, "You have to be very careful about what's said on the phone, you never know who's listening. But you'll know what I was doing when the story breaks." Okay. So a few months later I walk into work and see on the TV that our governor was indicted for corruption, including selling Obama's vacant Senate seat when he became president. '08. Rod Blagojevich then paraded all over TV, including on The Apprentice, to tout his innocence and beg PPL to listen to the tapes that exonerated him. Yeah, okay dude. I have different information.
So I know something that should require NDA. Apparently at some school someone was walking around the physics building with a Geiger counter, as one does. And it started going off. They went into an office, and in the file cabinet there was a small chunk of spent nuclear reactor fuel. Story goes whoever was in charge of arranging the complicated transportation of this stuff back to a disposal site retired and simply left it behind. No injuries, no giant story that I know of.
I had applied for a job at the call center not knowing what they specifically did, only knowing that I could do it. Turned out to be a telemarketing firm full of transitioning felons that were drooling on the headsets because management didn't care how high you were as long as your metrics had good sales per hour. Steers ripping off the elderly, specifically, by pushing them into adding identity theft insurance for $14.95 a month. They offer it through store credit cards, like Sears or Shell branded ones, that they issue. You get help access to credit counselors after your identity gets stolen and a free credit report every year, a thing that's free anyway, plus a thing I'm pretty sure you already have in the fine print of the card because it's Visa and they have insurance, inadequately offered via third party for $14.95 a month. The age field was 3 digits long. It was gross that they were selling information about your credit card account as marketing leads, companies that hire drug addict jailbirds who are given a commission to sell you insurance you already have just in case your identity gets stolen.
I cannot do this type of call center work anymore. I refuse. I'll live in the poorhouse before I rip off the elderly again. I did the same kind of shit, but for Dell accounts back in the day. Forgive me, baby Jesus.
A client invented a watch with 2 faces, so you could set it to time zones. Nice for international travelers who couldn't do simple math. My boss broke the door and the company was almost sued. He had to pay them something, but I don't know what. Idiot told the client that he shared the idea with a sales rep from a watch company to see if it was a good idea. The rep said yes. Don't worry, the rep promised to not tell anyone else.
I signed under a strict no phone, no picture policy on the job with a very large Hollywood movie production company, like one of the biggest. I was working as a greensman, basically making fake forests for the film. They got my crew to illegally dig up hundreds of huge lush ferns from a valley-bottom rainforest to use on set, get kicked around for a few days, and then thrown into a landfill. They repeated the process several times, doing hundreds of thousands of dollars of real estate damage, and they completely destroyed a forest floor.
Someone I know signed a NDA with a fruit company because her phone caught fire during the night while charging with official hardware. She got paid in the six figures to not talk about it after reporting the issue and got to discuss it with high-ranking officer of said company.
Yeah, those evil blackberries.
I was literally imagining a woman working at an orchard fruit company whose phone caught on fire and wondering WTH would the fruit company pay her for NDA.
I was working at a telecommunications company, the largest in my nation at that time. I overheard a conversation where two execs were discussing how they illegally bribed various politicians over $30 million for political kickbacks, which gave them significant control over a majority of the nation's infrastructure. It was only after their conversation had ended that they realized that I was quietly eating my lunch and had heard everything. Before 2 hours had passed, I had a 10-year non-disclosure agreement on my desk and a threat that if I told anyone, they would make sure I never worked in the sector again. This was in 2008. I believed them and quickly signed the agreement. Looking back now, I know there isn't much they could have done, but I was 18 and naive. The company went on to make billions from their acquisition. Though their popularity has waned, they still have certain massive advantages over their competition for which the government has always looked the other way. They have used their extensive advantage to hoard excessive amounts of money and set wholly unfair business standards for telecommunications for the nation, especially in comparison to other Western nations. They acted like bullies and never got called out for it.